Spoiler warning. The following discussion will contain spoilers. We recommend checking out the movie first, then coming back to hang with us. But if you don't care about that, glad to have you here. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of The Real Review. My name is Kevin.
And I'm John.
And we are The Real Movie Guys. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about Field of Dreams as Real Sports Month continues, where we take a look at some of your favorite sports movies you may or may not have seen. Field of Dreams is about an Iowa corn farmer who hears voices, interprets them as a command to build a baseball diamond in his field. He does, and the 1919 Chicago White Sox come to play games. This is a strange movie, right? I mean, if you look at it from everything else we're probably reviewing this month, this is probably, I would argue, the strangest.
Yeah, definitely.
Of all the sports movies.
A very interesting take on a sports movie.
Especially a sports movie, you tend to go and think, all right, we're going to watch, a team overcome something or, a group of individuals, which I guess there's some of that to a respect in this movie, but no, this is more of a supernatural mystery story than anything else.
Yeah, it's just starts off like a very interesting movie. Like when he starts hearing voices and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
then all of a sudden he's kind of like called to make this baseball field and build it. And when he's building it, you start seeing like after he's done building it, you see some hardships that he has to go through to just make sure that he was able to have this baseball field.
Right. I mean, right off the bat, I think one of my favorite things about this movie is how it blends genres, right? It blends mystery, drama, supernatural, the sports movie. It blends all these different things that we love individually, and I think it puts them in a uniquely really well executed package. The mystery draws you right away. As soon as Kevin Costner's hearing voices about building a field, you're like, what the heck is going on? And just from that point forward, this movie drives you. You want to know what's going on. You want to know what it's all about. You're almost as driven as Kevin Costner is in the actual film to know, what the heck is this?
Yeah, definitely.
Like I said, it's such a unique movie. Even the cinematography is one of the main things I actually really like in this movie as well. Whenever you see the field, it feels very dreamlike. Right, everything revolving baseball in this movie is filmed. I don't want to say it's not like blurry, right? I guess there is like a slight motion blur to everything, but even the field itself, the way they light the field in the darkness, even during the day, it just feels very dreamlike. Like it doesn't feel real.
Yeah, and just like I think also the way they did it, how like players come in and the players leave, like they just go through like the cornfield, and it's kind of like almost like they leave, but it also can get to your imagination. Like, where do they actually go? You know, like did they just hang out there in the cornfield, or did they go somewhere else? Because they just walk through, and it's like, okay, now they're gone.
Yeah, and
And like,
that's part of the imagination, I think, behind this movie. You're going to get some answers, right? You're going to get some things answered throughout this movie, but you can argue you don't get a lot of answers.
well,
Just
also
like
at
life,
first,
you know?
yeah. Also at first, it's interesting to see like, because they like when he first finally gets, builds the field, and then shoeless Joe Jackson comes,
Right.
and he sees him, and then like his family can see him too.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting on how they take it, like who can see these players and who can't, because like I think it's his brother-in-law comes to visit or something,
Right.
because his ownership is trying to take over the house payments, and he's like watching the game, and then his brother comes out to go talk to him and goes, I thought you said you were watching a game. And he's like, I am watching a game. And he's like, he must be going crazy or something. Like he doesn't see it, but like his family all sees the game.
Right.
But this one guy, he doesn't see it.
Right.
It's almost like if you don't believe in it, you won't see it.
Well, that's something I want to talk a little bit about, and I don't mean this to turn into like an English class examine the themes of the book kind of talk, but I think this movie is one of the few exceptions where I think it merits it. So there's a lot of themes in this movie. A couple I want to talk about. First one, faith. not necessarily religious faith, but faith in a higher power or something you don't understand. I think is a main theme in this movie, because you don't even know if it's God telling him to build that field. It's never actually said who's telling him to build that field ever. He's just being told, if you build it, he will come. And you know, it's just having the faith that if I follow through with something, that there's going to be something at the end. And even down the line, at times, Kevin Costner questions his faith. You can kind of relate it to that, where he questions, what's in it for me. Eventually, I think there's a scene at the end, towards the end, where he's like to Ray Liotta, who plays Shoeless Joe Jackson, who's kind of like I would say the go-to guy between everything that's going on. He tells him at that point, he's like, "What's in it for me? What am I getting out of this?" And Ray Liotta's like, "You didn't do it for that, did you? You did this because you believe."
Yeah.
So I think that's a really strong just representation of having some kind of faith in a higher power. Which,
yeah.
I'm not the most faithful, I'm not the most religious man myself, but I can really appreciate that aspect in storytelling for this movie.
Yeah, definitely.
Another thing I really like, and they kind of all tie together. There's redemption is a theme, second chances. Those two, I think, are really connected and are extremely strong in this movie. For especially, the whole redemption of Kevin Costner. Essentially, he's building this field. It turns out towards the, we learn about his life as the movie goes on. We learn, he didn't have the greatest relationship with his father. His father, pressured him to play baseball. And even though they were connected by it, they had a falling out, and his father died. And they never were able to have that reconnect. He was never able to show him his family, show him what he's accomplished in life. And he always has that extreme disconnect from his father. At the end, he does meet his father again, ends up being one of the players on the field, and he finally gets that closure, that redemption or second chance of something he messed up. And the whole movie is arguably penance for his misdeeds, right? He's trying to make up for everything he done. When he goes to help the doctor, right? When he goes to help Dr. Archibald, or Moonlight Graham, who I love, by the way. We'll talk about him a little bit later. But even his story, right? He wanted to play baseball, but he wasn't that great. And he ended up becoming a doctor and saving lives and doing everything his whole life. And Kevin Costner and James Earl Jones find him and bring him back to the field, so he gets that second chance, that redemption of, I can play baseball finally. I can prove that, I could have made it, right? Yeah. Like, I get that closure that he really wanted. And such a beautiful scene with that, too, where, they pick him up, and it's like some random kid they pick up, and ends up being the doctor, which I think is great. And he steps on the field and he plays the ball, but then he steps off the field, he becomes the doctor again to save Kevin Costner's daughter because she's choking, which kind of a stupid scene, but again, something we'll talk about a little bit later too. Like I said, then he steps on, that was it. That was his last chance. As soon as he steps off the baseball diamond, the dream's over. He has to move on. He has to complete his unfinished business. The whole thing that ghosts have unfinished business. That's why they hang around. That was the doctor's unfinished business, that he needed to prove himself in that game of baseball. Right. And then the main character would be James Earl Jones. James Earl Jones, plays Terrence Mann. He was a famous author. He wrote these brilliant articles and these stories that rallied and motivated people. And, he didn't get that last big story. His goal is to understand everything. He wants to know how the world works. He wants to know, what happens when you die. He wants to know everything. And with Kevin Costner, he goes on that journey to discovery, and then he goes with them at the end too. He goes with the baseball players into the great unknown to go on to that last journey. And I think that's a really touching scene as well. Just like, oh, why don't you come with us? We'll see what's going on. And he's like, all right, I got nothing else to lose.
He's like,
even though he does have a family, which is really weird. So I don't know what that was about. But he goes to disappear.
He didn't seem like a family guy though, really. No. He seemed like he wanted to be left alone and just like, like you could tell by like his door was like a door where nobody would go to. It's like kind of just this tiny little place, and he's just wanted to be alone.
Right.
With just like with his writings and stuff.
Yeah, and like I said, the last big thing is just relationships in general. I think are just such a key focus in this movie. The emphasis on Kevin Costner and his relationship with Amy Madigan is his wife, who plays his wife. Just their relationship is really strong, and that's why she can see the field, his daughter can see the field with him. Just there's such a strong emphasis on relationships in this movie, and again, I think that everyone's going to get something different out of this movie. I don't think everyone's going to get the same answers or the same interpretation, but I really do like the themes of this movie. I think it's very well executed.
It's a very interesting take on a lot of things too.
Right. And let's go into the actors, right? So Kevin Costner knocks it out of the park, no pun intended, but he does. He plays all the emotions correctly. This was definitely the catapulting movie for his career. At this time, this is when he really blew up after this movie, and it's easy to see why. He plays everything very sincere. His emotions, his disgust, his appreciation, the love he has for his family, and then like I said earlier, the reconciliation with his father is just a beautiful scene.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like, well, yeah, just the part where they're just playing simple game of catch,
Yeah,
and it almost like brings him back to like what he wanted for when he was a child, like just have a catch with his dad again. It almost gives you like a feeling of like what you could feel like if you lose somebody really close to you,
yeah,
and the only thing you ever want is you just want to spend like one more sense of time with that person one more time.
right.
Like no matter what it is, you just want it to be like, and sometimes it's like a certain thing, but sometimes it's just anything really.
Yeah, and especially in his instance where it was such a negative end that he never got that second chance to be with him, and for him to have that one final moment. And it's funny too because when they don't have any dialogue really together. As far as it's never outwardly said like "I'm sorry, Dad" or "I'm sorry, son" or anything like that. It's more just like he doesn't even call him Dad. Right in the beginning, it's kind of awkward where he's just like referring to him as who he is, but then at the end, he's like Dad, and when he does it, he lets that out. You're just like shit, chokes you up a little bit. Get Ray Liotta, Shoeless Joe Jackson does a great job. This was also very early in Ray Liotta's career. You can argue it even catapulted him, into Goodfellas and stuff like that after this. He plays it very well. Just that player just for the love of the game, right? He's all about loving the game and just getting his second chance to play. Even he has a redemption arc. I actually really didn't go into Shoeless Joe Jackson. The whole story is Shoeless Joe Jackson, at least he's not a real person from what I know, but in this movie, he was accused of cheating in his final days, and his career never recovered from it. So he died with like that whole smirk. Even though everyone's like, oh, well, he really didn't. There's evidence he didn't. But he never got to redeem himself in his final days of his career. So this movie kind of goes about it, showing him getting to play those games and redeem, for the love of the sport. Because at the end of his life, he probably didn't have much love for the sport. So it's nice to see him getting that second chance too. And real Ray Liotta plays it very well.
Yeah, definitely.
He's almost otherworldly. He feels otherworldly at times. He doesn't feel like he's actually on this plane of existence.
No, he feels like he's out of this world.
I mean, they feel like they're stuck in like 1919, right? When I see those players, like, it's so convincing. Very, very convincing to an extent.
This is not Iowa. This is somewhere else.
Yeah, and it's like that. Like I say, it all circles back to the whole field, like I was talking about. Everything's very dreamlike in that field, and in that small enclosed space, it's like if time stopped in 1919. It just feels like that, and everyone's performances feel genuine. You don't get to know any of the other players, but that's not the point. I don't think the point is you're capturing that one moment, and it's very beautiful and very touching. Burt Lancaster as well. I don't know, Johnny. I don't know if you're familiar with Burt Lancaster at all as an actor.
No.
He plays Moonlight Graham. He plays the older version of him. Burt Lancaster, very famous film actor early on. I mean, this man in the 40s was friggin'... He's old in this movie, but he was in, some of like the landmark films of a generation. And he puts on an awesome performance as Moonlight Grant. He was actually, ironically, he ended up being one of my favorite characters in the movie, even though he wasn't on screen very long. Just, getting to know his story between him fulfilling, his duties as a doctor and the love he had with his wife and his career and love of baseball never faltering, even though he gave it up for the medical practice. Just a really touching character at times. And I really thought his performance stand out. And again, very heartfelt and genuine. Last but not least, we have to talk about James Earl Jones.
James Earl Jones.
Mufasa, Darth Vader himself right here. Which is not, I mean, I guess you could, not as maybe as powerful as those characters, but James Earl Jones he has a presence about him where everything he says, I believe, no matter what it is. Like he has such a presence about him. And it's not just his voice, it's just his very presence. Like when he's upset, I'm like upset. I'm aggravated when he's aggravated. He's just he steals the show almost in some aspects of this movie.
Well, even when he's at the baseball game, like he's so annoyed at the baseball game, like
I start getting annoyed.
I don't understand why I'm here. And you're thinking like, yeah, I don't understand why he's here either. This baseball game's terrible. What the heck's going on here?
Yeah.
And it's like you could almost go through his character with him. Like that's how good of an actor and great acting that he does.
Yeah,
it
and the emotion and you see his love for investigating, right? You see his love for the chase of the mystery. Like when he's trying to find out about Moonlight Graham throughout, in the middle of the movie, he's interviewing people trying to get this story and he's frustrated because he's trying to find out like what's going on. Who is this guy? What was he about? Trying to find the links in between everything. And, he just can't. And then at the end of the movie, he gives arguably one of the greatest speeches in like baseball movie history about the Field of Dreams. It's a beautiful speech. I mean, there's even, if you go on YouTube, there's actually players that know this speech by heart. There's actually people that like know it. It's memorized into their brains. For the love of baseball speech is by far like one of the most iconic things in baseball, cinematic history.
Yeah, definitely.
Not to mention, this movie's parodied beyond belief, If you build it, he will come. I don't know how many things have parodied that phrase throughout the years since this movie. So if that doesn't nail it in, pop culture history, I don't know what did. That phrase alone just, cements this movie. Unfortunately, there are some negatives we do have to talk about this movie. I wouldn't say they're damning in any sense of the means, but they stick out to me at least. Kevin Costner has some voiceover in this movie, like early on, almost a narration to an extent where, he talks about, dreams and, his life and his history. As great as an actor as he is, I feel like he wasn't trying at all in these narrations. I felt very wooden at times. I felt like I was just reading something. Like of me just going, okay, this is my story. I'm going to tell you about it. All right. Here we go. Like it felt like that, you know what I mean? Very robotic. And
yeah, definitely.
Again, it's whatever, it is what it is. It's a little distracting just because it is so wooden and especially compared to his performance in the movie, which is so goddamn good.
Yeah.
And then you have that and you're like, oh, okay. It's a little off-putting for me.
Yeah, definitely.
That's the first one. Second thing, unfortunately, I didn't like his wife's performance at all. She really annoyed me throughout this movie.
I was just going to mention that too, yeah.
I can appreciate their relationship and what they were going for, but I'm sorry, like, Amy Madigan, like, she annoys me throughout this movie, especially there's a weird subplot where and that's a negative too, which we're going to get into, but there's a subplot where they talk about burning books, essentially like banning books from school, and Amy Madigan's and like trying to get involved with the council and everything like that. There's this like weird scene, and it goes on for quite a while, where they're fighting about burning books and free speech, and she compares them all to Nazis, and it was just a really weird. I felt like it was just not necessary. I felt like it was just a scene to give her some time to shine,
which it didn't.
No, and it didn't really add anything. The only thing it added was, finding and connecting James Earl Jones to the plot, I guess. You could argue that was like the thread that started that whole journey. But it was so out of left field. No pun intended again. But it really was. It didn't do anything for me. And her mannerisms were just very annoying. And I don't know. I don't know why I felt like she was playing it over the top a little too much.
I don't know if it's that like Kevin Costner and James Earl Jones and everybody else were so good in the movie that it makes her look worse,
Okay.
or that she's just this wasn't one of her best performances.
Yeah, no, I can definitely I kind of actually agree with you on that one, to be honest. I really don't I don't know. I don't know what it is, but she just irked me. That's really
Yeah,
what it comes down to. Unfortunately, her performance irked me, and again, it could be because of being overshadowed so much by such stronger actors, but I also think it has a little bit to do with just placement in the plot, which brings me to my last negative on this movie. Uh, there's some suspension of disbelief. There's a lot of suspension of disbelief that's needed in this movie. I did compliment it earlier about how the themes of faith and believing. Uh, I don't know. I feel like the plot's a little contrived at points, especially getting Kevin Costner to James Earl Jones. That whole scenario of like James Earl Jones wrote a book that included his dad's name in it, and getting those plot threads together so they can meet each other. It just felt a little too convoluted, right? There could have been a simpler way to do that.
yeah, I agree.
That just doesn't. I mean, I don't want to say it's bad necessarily. I just feel like you could have gone about it differently. I think overall,
No,
there's other
yeah,
ways you could have
definitely.
gotten to that. I think, and then even though I praise Moonlight Graham so much, even getting to that point, it's kind of messy. Like the whole road trip with Kevin
Yeah.
Costner and James Earl Jones. I guess I like it, but at the same time, I question how it was placed in the story
Well,
and in relation to like the Field of Dreams and getting all the players where they need to be.
I also
I feel like it hurts the pacing a smidge in this movie.
one other problem I have, like just with this movie,
Mm-hmm.
is like what you were saying, how when the doctor comes to help the girl choking,
Right. Oh yeah.
it seems very weird, like just the way that they portray when she's choking and how the doctor saves her,
Thank you for bringing it up because that scene is so weird. I don't know. It's just the way it
like
was
thrown
shot.
in there.
Like she fell off, and like I thought at first when it happened, I didn't put the whole hot dog connection together. I
Yeah,
thought
me
she just
neither.
fell off the bleachers, and I'm like,
That's what I
that's not
thought.
that big of a fall. Like you're gonna be
Like she
okay,
cracked her
kid.
head or something.
Yeah, I don't know. It felt very strange, and then I realized she was choking. I'm like, okay, but still, I'm not really convinced by it. It felt like it was such a. I hate to say it was so silly that I kind of laughed at it more than like, and then you laughed at it for a second, and then we got to the sad Moonlight Graham passing on was brought back the sadness, but the whole like daughter fall, it was just kind of silly. Even the way it was shot, it's like nah, she like fell out. It was like slow mo, and she
But you
fell
know
off
what's
the thing, fell off the
you know what's
bleachers. But hot dogs aside, this movie is very well done overall. Like I said, these things are, the issues with the plot. I think you can chalk up to like the whole story of having faith and taking that leap of faith with the plot. So you're kind of taking it with this movie. So you can excuse it. Again, the hot dog thing is a bit silly, but you know, whatever. It's fine.
I mean, it is called Field of Dreams. So
Yeah,
if you,
yeah,
there are some weird things in dreams.
yeah,
So
and it lives up to it. We're at that point of the review though, where I think we're gonna give our final scores. I'm gonna give Field of Dreams an A. This movie was nominated for Best Picture, and I think it wholeheartedly does deserve that. This is an excellent movie. Like I said, there are some things we pointed out that were either silly or feel disjointed or disconnected, but you can't deny the performances, the themes that are in this movie. This is a movie where you can watch it a few times and I think take away something different each time you watch it. It's just a very, very well crafted movie. It still holds up today. It feels like it was still just fresh out, fresh into the theaters. This movie's a great experience. I definitely recommend everyone to check it out. John, where do you stand with this movie?
yeah, I agree. I give it an A. I think it was one of those classic good movies. It had a good story. There's like some things that you don't like and some things you do,
Mm-hmm.
but altogether, put together, this movie was really good. It definitely deserves to be nominated,
It
and I feel
deserves
like
a place in your heart.
yeah,
It is, and it's if you like sports movies, and you can even argue that sports, baseball in general is the bindings to this movie, right? If anything else, baseball is the heart of this movie. And if anything else we review, we talked about how strange it was and how different this movie is. Baseball is essentially the heart that beats within this movie that allows everything else to exist. It may not be about necessarily a team or about a player or about the typical sports story, but I feel like baseball is almost dreamlike. It's almost elevated to another level in this movie, and this movie does nothing but appreciate it. So, John, where can the people find us at home?
Well, you can find us on YouTube at TheReelMovieGuys. Go to our channel, like it, subscribe, tell us your opinions on these movies that we review and stuff. You can also find us on Twitter at TheReelMovieGuy, and you can follow us, like us, see what we're doing. And you could also find us at many podcast platforms such as...
Yes, for your listening pleasure, we are available in podcast form at iTunes, Spotify, Anchor, Google Podcast, Overcast, Breaker, Radio Public, and Pocket Cast. Be sure to give us a listen at any of those fine places. If you already are right now, hey, we greatly appreciate it. Just search Real Movie Guys. We should pop right up. Thank you all so much again for joining us for this episode of The Real Review. My name's Kevin. He's John. We are the Real Movie Guys. Real guys, real movies, real thoughts. Again, thanks for joining us for Real Sports. Play the game, watch the movies. We'll see you next time.
See ya!